Tell me about your MS.
Well, when I was first diagnosed or where I am now?
Let's start with your diagnosis.
Okay, I was diagnosed in 2002. It came as a shock for me and my wife because I went from being a pretty good athlete to all of a sudden being told, hey, you're going to become disabled in a few months or a few years, I would say. And that was pretty shocking, hard hitting for us because we had a kid and we were in the middle of having our second kid when we were told. And we didn't know how that was going to, or what the progression was going to be like for us.
Oftentimes when people get diagnosed with MS, their problems start years beforehand. So if you were diagnosed in 2002, how are you doing in 2000?
Well, I would say in 2000 I was doing fairly good. I was still coaching, still teaching. Probably the thing that affected me the most at the time was heat. I would notice that I would get a little bit more fatigue quicker than I normally had been up until that point. Having played college football, it just didn't hit me. I remember running around the field taking laps, and all of a sudden I could feel numbness in my back, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" But other than that, it was nothing severe, nothing that I said, "Oh, this is not normal."
When do you think you started noticing the problems with heat?
I would say I started noticing the problems with heat. It would have been in 2001 when I was coaching. I mean, it was all of a sudden it just seemed like I would wear down a little bit more quicker or a little quicker than I normally would. But I would say probably the things that I began to notice first was when I was I was a math teacher, and I was in the middle of teaching class one day, and I would look over to my right, and it just didn't seem right. I look over to my left, and that didn't seem right either. And then I asked the students, "Hey, students, check out my eyes. Look at my eyes." And I would cut my eyes to the right, and one eye wouldn't track over, and I would cut them to the left, and another eye wouldn't track over. And we just thought it was a pretty cool, parlor trick. And then I was told to go see my HR person, and she told me, "You know what, OJ, you need to go see an ophthalmologist at the time." So I went to see the ophthalmologist, and the ophthalmologist put me in the machine and asked me, "All right, how's your vision?" "Well, your vision turns out to be like 2015. I said, "Well, doctor, if you would take the machine off my head and just look at my eyes." And I would cut my eyes to the right and cut them to the left. And he said, "Oh, you need to go see my neurologist." And so I went from being told that I had a problem with my vision to thinking, "Oh, I'm crazy," because at that time I didn't know what a neurologist was. I was thinking neurologist, psychologist, they're all the same. Someone that's dealing with the brain, you're not right in the head. So that's where it started for me.
So you went from having heat sensitivity to starting having eye movement abnormalities to seeing a neurologist. Did the neurologist jump straight away to multiple sclerosis, or were other things brought up?
No, right away when the neurologist looked at my eyes, he says, "Well, I think you might have MS." So he recommended that I go get an MRI, and then the MRI came back and he said, "Yeah, that might be MS, or at least it appears you have MS." And then he said, "But we want to finalize this." So they asked me to go get a spinal tap.
Okay.
And so they went in and had the spinal tap, long needle, and needles didn't bother me. As long as I could see the needle, it didn't affect me. And this needle I couldn't see because it was going in my back, and it was fairly long needle, drew the blood, and of course it came back, everything was positive. Yes, no doubt, it is MS. So
a lot of people who get diagnosed with MS have a spinal tap. Not everyone with MS, though, who has a spinal tap has a positive spinal tap, meaning it doesn't always show findings consistent with MS.
I didn't know that.
A lot of people, and also depends on where you live in the world, a lot of people will have actually negative findings on their spinal tap and yet actually be diagnosed with MS. But it sounds like you had symptoms.
Yes.
You had physical findings. you had an MRI, and then you also had a spinal tap. And so all those things led to the conclusion of multiple sclerosis.
Yes. No doubt. For me, it was MS, or at least when he told me it was MS, I didn't question it. I didn't need a second opinion. For me, it was, okay, let's deal with it. What's the next step?
And what did they tell you the next step was?
At that time, he put me on medication. I think it was interferon beta 1B or 1A is Avonex.
Okay.
And it was something, again, it was a needle that I had to inject myself once a week with that one.
So taking that weekly intramuscular, so into the muscle injection of interferon beta 1A, like you say, brand name Avonex, how did you feel on it?
I felt pretty good. I felt like it was doing what it needed to do. But again, for me, because my attitude was just deal with it, take it, whatever the doctor says, it's got to be right. Trust the doctor. And so I was doing that, and I was on Avonex for a few years, I guess.
Okay.
And then more symptoms, or at least I started to have a relapse at that time. And they changed from Avonex to Rebif, and then from Rebif to Tysabri. And then like at this time I'm on Lemtrada,
Okay.
which is sort of like sort of like being on a cancer drug, where it wipes out your white blood cells, and it reboots your immune system.
Each time you made a change in your disease-modifying therapy, we also call them DMTs, has that been because of side effects or because of relapses?
I would say it's mostly due to relapses, because I didn't have any side effects on any of the drugs, or at least I didn't feel like I did. I didn't show symptoms or side effects physically that my wife would pick up on, or that I picked up on. Probably the last one, Tysabri, is when I started to show signs of the, I think it was called PML. It was a brain disease that you could die from. That's what they told me was one of the side effects of the drug. And
so you switched not because you were having PML, but because of a JC virus?
Yes.
Because of a lab test?
Yes.
And they thought your risk was getting to be too high?
Yes, that's
on the
what it was.
How long do you think you were on natalizumab or Tysabri for? I
was on Tysabri for, I want to say 2 years, because I started that Tysabri probably in 2012, and went from 2012 to 2014, and that's when I switched over to Lemtrada.
Did you wait any amount of time between the Tysabri and the Lemtrada?
Yes, and that I had to take time, or at least let the Tysabri get out of my system before I could do Lemtrada. And during that time is when I started to actually decline the most. Okay. That's when my mobility really started to go downhill for me. And then it was when I got back on Lemtrada that I actually leveled off.
Before going on the Tysabri, do you think that disability was happening, or was it basically you were handling your MS?
I would say it was not. I was probably in the mode of denial, okay, more than anything else. As long as I could deny it, it wasn't real. And the minute that it became real and I couldn't deny it was when I started to see the physical signs of, I can't use my right hand. I can't use my right leg. I can't drive anymore. When that started to come into the picture and I couldn't deny it, that's when MS became real for me.
And when do you think that was around?
That was probably the 2012, 2013. That's when I said, okay, this is real. I really do have MS. Because when I was diagnosed in 2002, and I went from 2002 to 2012 walking around as if nothing was wrong, and people would look at me and say, you're sick? And I would say, yeah, they tell me I have MS. And they're like, I don't know, OJ, you look pretty good to us. I said, okay, as long as I look pretty good, I guess I am pretty good. And you know, it was the whole, don't look at me. You really can't look at me until I am sick. I am sick indeed.
So how does that feel to go from someone who at first was really healthy, you know, an athlete, and then being diagnosed with MS, but it was just part of your life. You took your therapy, it went okay, to actually having disability from the multiple sclerosis. How did that feel?
It does not feel good, I can tell you. Again, I was a good athlete. And to not be able to do the things that I once could do, to not be able to go out and, like my firstborn kid, I could go out and play ball with him, throw the ball around and be active and feel like a good part of his life. Second kid, same thing. My third kid did not get that experience. And for me, that's when it began to hurt. But my kids, my wife, they all understood, they accepted it, and they adjusted to the lifestyle with me. But I mean, for me, I won't say it's painful, but that's probably the best description that I could use. I mean, it does hurt.
What supported you through this journey? Where have you gotten your strength from?
My wife.
Okay.
She is the one that I lean on the most, and she is just having her as a partner through this all, and being the caregiver that she is. The good thing is she's a nurse, and so she gets it.
Okay. But
for her, it's also personal now. It's more personal because it's her husband, her spouse. But she's the one that I have to lean on. Like there's times whenever I feel down or I might get a little depressed, I can always go to her and talk to her about it.
Has religion been important at all?
I am not the most religious person.
Okay.
Yes, I believe there's higher powers out there that are dealing with this. That for me, it's, hey, you've been dealt this hand. Things happen for a reason. I'm always searching for, okay, it happened for a reason. Now let's find what's the good that's going to come from it. That's just been my attitude. Everyone will tell you who meets me, they say, OJ, you never stop smiling. Mm-hmm. I said, why do I need to stop smiling? I mean, I could complain, but if I complain, it won't do you any good. It definitely doesn't do me any good. So let's be positive and find the good things about it.
How has the rest of your family responded to your MS diagnosis?
When I see my mom, I can tell that it hurts her, because she wants to see the old OJ, mm-hmm. But she cannot see that one. It's the same thing when I see my older brother and my younger brother. They know, or they want to see me overcome this, and we all want to see me overcome it. Yeah. And it hurts them that that they have to see me struggle with the walker to get around and stuff, because that's not the person that they were used to seeing growing up. I mean, they deal with it. We all deal with it.
Anybody in the family with multiple sclerosis?
I'm the only one. When I was diagnosed, when I was diagnosed in 2002, of course, we did the whole family history. Anyone in the family? No, it's just me. Well, why is it just me? I don't know. Again, it goes back to, for me, things happen for a reason. Let's find the good in it, and let's overcome this.
Anybody else with autoimmune diagnoses? Rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, Crohn's disease, diabetes type 1, so juvenile or insulin-dependent diabetes.
If you want to say diabetes, on my parental side, there's a lot of diabetics. My dad passed away.
But aside from people who get diabetes later in life, people who kind of have diabetes when they're young kids, we call that diabetes type 1. Those are often the people who take insulin. Any thyroid disease or anything like that?
Yeah.
So oftentimes in people with MS, we don't find other family members with MS, but we may find other family members with other autoimmune diagnoses.
Okay.
Because we think in MS, the body's defense mechanisms, instead of attacking outside invaders like viruses and bacteria and fungi, might attack itself. And when it does that in the joints, we call that rheumatoid arthritis. When it does that in the pancreas, we call it diabetes type 1. When it happens in the skin, we call that psoriasis. And when it happens in the nerves, and the covering of the nerves called myelin, we call that multiple sclerosis.
Yeah. I can't think of anyone in my family that has any of that.
How's it been as an African American having a diagnosis of MS?
Well, let's see. When I was diagnosed, and I'm told, normally African American males your age don't get this diagnosis. So that's 1, 2, 3 strikes. And then they say, I want you to understand this, with your population, MS tends to be a little bit more aggressive. And that's what I'm starting to see now. And when my mobility started to go down, and all of a sudden I went from one cane to a walker to I needed to have a mobility scooter to get around. And I said, ooh, this stuff is really being aggressive. Pretty soon I don't know what I'll be able to do. But I do know I'll deal with it. That's just who I've been.
Just who you've been.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.